What if the storm you're running from is actually the very thing meant to save you? Jonah was a man caught between fear and duty, choosing to flee rather than face his calling. But sometimes, avoiding our purpose only traps us deeper in chaos. This story isn't just about a prophet and a giant fish, it's a reflection of the struggles we all face when we resist what life asks of us. When the world feels overwhelming, and the path ahead seems impossible, what do? Jonah's journey challenges us to confront our fears, embrace uncertainty, and find courage in the darkest moments. As we explore his story, we'll uncover lessons about faith, resistance, and the power of surrender. This isn't just an ancient tale, it's a mirror for anyone searching for meaning amid life's storms. Let's dive into the depths and discover what lies beneath the surface. The call you can't ignore. Jonah stood at the edge of the busy port, the scroll from God clenched tightly in his hand. The command was clear: go to Nineveh and warn them of their wickedness. But Nineveh was the enemy's city, a place he feared and despised. The thought of delivering a message of mercy to those people twisted his insides. Around him, sailors shouted orders, and ships prepared to set sail. One ship, bound for Tarshish, caught his eye, a chance to escape the mission he didn't want. Without hesitation, Jonah boarded the ship. The captain watched him silently as Jonah paid his fare, trying to convince himself this was the right choice. As the ship moved away from the shore, the sea breeze mixed with his growing unease. That night, lying below deck, the sounds of the ship creaking and waves crashing filled the silence. A small, unwelcome thought crept in. What if Nineveh could change? He pushed it away, afraid of what facing that truth would mean. By morning, dark clouds gathered, and the wind howled fiercely. The sailors scrambled as the sea turned violent, waves crashing over the deck. Jonah stood frozen, rain stinging his face, knowing this storm was no accident. The crew cast lots to find the cause of their misfortune, and the lot fell on him. With a heavy heart, Jonah confessed, "Throw me into the sea." The moment he spoke, he understood that running from his calling wasn't freedom. It was the beginning of a deeper struggle. The storm within. The ship groaned as waves slammed its sides, timbers creaking like a beast in agony. Sailors scrambled across the deck, their prayers to foreign gods drowned by the roar of wind and water. Jonah clung to the mast, his cloak soaked and heavy, the storm's fury mirroring the chaos in his chest. "This is no natural tempest," the captain shouted, gripping Jonah's arm. "Who are you running from?" Jonah's throat tightened. He wanted to lie, but the truth clawed its way out. "I serve the God of heaven and earth, and I'm fleeing his command." The crew's eyes widened, not in awe, but terror. Fear of the divine collided with fear of death. The sailors rowed harder, muscles straining against the waves, desperate to reach the shore. But the storm only worsened, the sea swallowing their efforts whole. "What do we do?" a sailor cried, clutching a pendant of his god. Jonah stared at the churning water, guilt pressing heavier than the rain. "This is my doing," he realized. The storm wasn't punishment. It was a boundary, a force to push him back toward the path he'd abandoned. "Throw me overboard," he muttered. The men hesitated, unwilling to spill blood. But when the next wave nearly capsized the ship, desperation overruled morality. Hands trembling, the sailors lifted Jonah. For a moment he met their eyes, not enemies now, but victims of his defiance. As his body hit the water, the cold shocked him into clarity. The waves dragged him under, salt burning his lungs. Is this how it ends? He wondered, darkness closing in. But then, a shadow loomed, massive, silent, inevitable. The last thing he saw before the jaws closed around him was not teeth but an abyss, and within it, a strange, suffocating peace. In the belly of the beast. Darkness enveloped Jonah as he sank beneath the waves, the cold pressing in from all sides. Time lost meaning in the vast silence, broken only by the steady rhythm of his own breath. Inside the great fish, Jonah found himself trapped not just physically but emotionally and spiritually. The walls around him mirrored the walls he had built in his heart. Walls of fear, anger, and stubborn pride. In this strange solitude, he was forced to confront the truth he had long avoided. Running from his calling only deepened his isolation. As hours passed, Jonah's thoughts turned inward. He remembered the faces of the people in Nineveh, the city he had tried to escape. What if they truly deserved mercy? What if his mission was not a punishment but an opportunity for redemption, not just for them, but for himself? The silence of the fish became a space for reflection, a place where Jonah wrestled with his doubts and fears. He realized that surrender was not defeat, but the first step toward freedom. Finally, Jonah prayed, a raw, honest plea from the depths of his soul. He acknowledged his mistakes and asked for strength to face what lay ahead. In that moment, the great fish became more than a prison. It was a womb of transformation. Jonah's heart began to soften, and with it, a new resolve took root. The storm outside raged on, but inside, a quiet peace began to grow, a peace born from acceptance and hope. The message he hated to deliver. Jonah emerged onto the sun-baked streets of Nineveh, his skin still tingling from the salt of the sea. The city loomed before him, a sprawling maze of noise, stench, and arrogance. He clenched his jaw as he walked, his sandals kicking up dust. 40 days, he thought. 40 days until this cesspool burns. His message was simple, rehearsed with bitter precision. 40 days, and Nineveh will be overthrown. The words tasted like bile. He shouted them in markets at crossroads, his voice sharp and unyielding. Crowds paused. Merchants lowered their scales. Children froze mid-laugh. To Jonah's shock, the city trembled. Sackcloth replaced silk. Ashes smeared once proud faces. The king himself descended from his throne, stripped of his crown, and knelt in the dirt. "Let everyone turn from their evil ways," he declared, his voice cracking. Jonah watched, fists tight, as repentance swept the streets. A child offered him a fig, a gesture of shared hunger. He refused it, his stomach churning. "They don't deserve this," he seethed. "They deserve fire. They deserve justice." But God's mercy came swift and unrelenting. The promised destruction never fell. Jonah stood on a hill outside the city, watching smoke rise from countless penitent fires. His victory felt hollow. Why save them? He raged inwardly. They'll return to their sins tomorrow. The sun beat down, but a colder truth shadowed him. This wasn't about Nineveh. It was about him. God had used the very people Jonah despised to expose his own heart, a heart that preferred judgment over grace, pride over purpose. The prophet sat in the dust, his triumph as dry as the bones he'd wished to see. Mercy that stings. Jonah sat on a barren hilltop, his back to the city. Below, Nineveh buzzed with life. Children laughed, merchants bartered, and smoke rose from altars now devoted to repentance. The prophet's hands clenched the dry earth. They should be ashes, he thought. Why spare them? His victory felt hollow, his obedience a betrayal. A vine had sprouted overnight, its broad leaves shielding him from the scorching sun. He clung to its shade like a child to a blanket, finding solace in this small mercy. But deep down he knew it was temporary. At dawn, a worm gnawed through the vine's roots. By midday, the plant withered, its leaves curling into brittle skeletons. The sun beat down, relentless. Jonah's throat burned as he glared at the sky. "Is this your lesson?" he shouted. "You care more for a weed than for me?" His anger masked a deeper ache, the sting of grace given to those he deemed unworthy. A hot wind carried the distant hum of Nineveh's joy, each note a thorn in his pride. God's voice came not in thunder, but in the silence that followed. "You care about a plant you didn't grow. Shouldn't I care about a city of thousands?" Jonah froze. The question hung in the air, stripping him bare. His rage dissolved into something raw, shame. He'd clung to his hatred, blind to the beauty of second chances, for Nineveh, for himself. The hilltop, once his refuge, now felt like a mirror reflecting his own stubborn heart. He buried his face in his hands, the weight of God's mercy pressing him into the dust. The shadow that won't fade. Jonah sat beneath the withered vine, the sun scorching his skin like a punishment he couldn't escape. He glared at the horizon, where Nineveh's towers gleamed under God's mercy, a mercy he still refused to accept. "Why spare them?" he muttered, kicking dust over the dead plant's roots. His hands trembled, not from heat, but from the gnawing truth. He'd rather cling to his anger than embrace grace. The wind carried laughter from the city below, a sound that made his jaw tighten. They'll forget. They always do. A shadow fell over him, not from a vine this time, but from a passing cloud. For a moment, relief. Then the cloud shifted, and the sun returned, relentless. Jonah's throat burned as he shouted at the sky, "You care more for weeds and pagans than for your prophet." His words echoed back, hollow. The silence that followed was worse. He wanted a rebuttal, a thunderclap, anything to justify his rage. But God's voice came as a whisper. "Shouldn't I care?" The question lingered, stripping Jonah's pride bare. He stared at his hands, calloused from digging graves for a judgment that never came. The truth settled like ash. This wasn't about Nineveh. It was about him. God had used the very people Jonah hated to expose his heart, a heart that preferred the comfort of resentment over the chaos of redemption. The prophet slumped forward, tears cutting through the dust on his face. "What have I become?" The city's joy drifted up the hill, a melody he couldn't silence. Mercy had won. And Jonah? He sat alone, a prisoner of his own unforgiveness. The reluctant prophet's redemption. Jonah walked through the gates of Nineveh, the ash from the city's fires clinging to his sandals. The people he once despised now moved with urgency. Merchants tore their robes, children fasted, and even the king knelt in the dirt. Jonah's voice, once sharp with judgment, faltered as he repeated God's warning. 40 days and Nineveh will be overthrown. But the words felt empty. He searched the crowd, expecting defiance or mockery, but found only tear-streaked faces and hands raised in prayer. They were sincere. His message had touched them deeper than he imagined. Days passed without destruction. Jonah climbed a barren hill overlooking the city, his heart torn between anger and confusion. Below, Nineveh's repentance burned bright, but Jonah's spirit withered. "Why spare them?" he thought bitterly. "They'll forget and return to sin." God's voice interrupted his thoughts. "Is it right for you to be angry?" Jonah snapped back. "You show mercy to them, but not to me." He laughed bitterly. "I'd rather die than watch this." Then, unexpectedly, a vine sprouted overnight, shading him from the sun. For a moment Jonah smiled, but by morning a worm had eaten its roots, and the plant withered. The sun scorched him as he cried out, "Even this, you take from me." God's reply was gentle but firm. "You cared for a plant you did not grow. Should I not care for a city of thousands who cannot tell right from wrong?" Jonah froze, the truth piercing his pride. His mission was not about justice. It was about mercy. And mercy, he realized, reflected his own need for grace. Final thoughts. Jonah's story isn't just about a man swallowed by a fish. It's about the storms we all face, the challenges you're avoiding, the hard conversations, the big decisions, the forgiveness you hesitate to give, aren't obstacles, but invitations. Like Jonah, we often run from what scares us, fearing the unknown more than trusting the purpose waiting ahead. But the truth is, you can't escape your calling. Your fish, whether it's failure, rejection, or crisis, is not punishment. It's a space where clarity and growth begin. Nineveh changed, and so did Jonah. His anger couldn't overshadow the power of mercy. What if the thing you resist is actually the doorway to your next chapter? Take a moment to ask yourself, what am I running from and what might happen if I face it? If this story resonated with you, don't let it end here. Subscribe for more stories where ancient wisdom meets modern life. Share this video with someone who needs to hear, your storm has a purpose. Remember, sometimes the path forward starts by stopping and listening to the silence you've been trying to escape. The storm ends. The purpose remains. Will you answer?